Excited to introduce our guest speaker this morning. We have Zach and Savannah Shaffer with us this morning. Zach is the son of the proud parents of Chuck and Linda Shaffer. Savannah is from San Antonio, right? They both graduated from Oklahoma Christian. Zach grew up in Tahlequah Church there. But since 2018, they've been working in Zagreb, Croatia. And they're working with the Kuslovana Church of Christ, and they're doing great work there. They're in their third year. I'm not sure how long they plan to stay, but looking forward to hearing from Zach this morning. And here he comes. Come on up, Zach.
It's an honor to be up here speaking in front of you all. So many of you sitting in this room made me the man and Christian I am today. So many of your children were the people, brothers and sisters that I discovered Christ with. So it really is an honor to be up here. When I was young, I always loved when missionaries would come up and speak because they had pictures. So, in order to foster a heart for missions among today's youth, I have also provided a slideshow of pictures. And if you have a wandering mind, I hope these can rein you back in a little bit. So I want to start off talking about a certain saying. And when I was young, this saying was kind of the mantra of sharing the gospel. Maybe it still gets around. It's, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I heard that a lot. But it didn't take me too long in Croatia to run into some problems with that saying. Let me tell you a story. We started learning language pretty quickly. It's just one of the things you got to do. So, we would take a tram ride. Now, if you're like me and you had no idea what a tram was, just imagine above ground subway, public transportation system. It took us about a 30-minute, 40-minute ride from where we lived to our school where we would learn the language. And we get on that every day. Wasn't too long. We had just started making it. Maybe we'd had 3 or 4 classes. We got on the tram not too long after. A homeless man got on the tram, and he sits just a couple feet away from me. He's got matted hair, long matted hair, wearing bags on his shoes, carrying all his possessions in torn up plastic bags, and I couldn't help but notice him. We'd been talking a lot in church about Jesus and his ministry to the poor, and how much he cared about the poor. And I'm sitting here eating my breakfast, looking across from me at somebody who has nothing. And I couldn't help it. I just start getting this burning in my heart that I should be doing something. I should be doing something. I should be loving this person like my Savior loves this person. And it's getting towards the end of the tram ride, and I don't know what to do. So I go over to Savannah and ask her if I could give him one of our shopping bags, because this guy's carrying all of his stuff around in ripped up plastic bags. We have these nice cloth bags. Surely he could make use of one of these. So she says yes, and I go over to him. I don't know what to say because we just started learning the language. And so I just stick out my hand and offer him the bag and try and mumble something. He looks up at me and he looks at the bag, he shakes his head and looks away. And so I look down at the bag, look up at him, and offer it to him one more time. He looks up at me and looks at the bag and shakes his head and looks looks away again. And I do it one more time. I offer it to him. And he looks at me and he starts speaking in Croatian. I can't understand him. He's talking too fast, but I know he's mad. He's angry. He's talking too fast for me to catch anything, but then he starts repeating one phrase, and I'll never be 100% sure that this is what he said, but this is what I think he said. What do you know? What do you know? What do you know? So I got off the tram with tears in my eyes and a question. What do I know? I'm thankful that I serve a God who makes great practice of redeeming mistakes into his glory. And so I pray that he redeemed that mistake to his glory. But that question has been my haunting question the past 2 years. What do I know? What's the relationship between knowledge and love? It's more complicated than a single saying can describe. It's not enough to say, do something nice for people, and they'll listen to God. And from the other side, it's not enough to say, if I know more, people will be more likely to agree with the truth. That doesn't mean that the sayings are completely wrong. It means that the relationship is more complicated than a phrase can capture. And so we have to ask, where do knowledge and love intersect? We need to ask because the relationship, although the relationship is complicated, it's extremely powerful. Lost people open their hearts. Barriers crumble away when a Christian acts out of knowledge and love together. So today, I'm taking you on an abridged journey of our last 2 years in Croatia, and we're going to talk about 4 things: knowledge, love, fear, and ignorance. So first, knowledge. That's where the story began, with the question, what do you know? The man on the tram, what was he really asking me? What did he mean by, what do I know? I think when we talk about what knowing means, we default to a definition like knowing is a collection of information. And we might give examples like, I know a lot about frogs. I could tell you a ton of frog facts. But that's not the kind of knowing that the man on the tram was talking about. And I think we all recognize that. He wasn't asking me for information. He was questioning my experience. He wasn't asking if I knew about him. He was asking if I knew him. The main thing, the first thing we need to recognize about knowledge is that experience defines knowledge. Knowledge is experiential. We often think about knowledge as a collection of facts. That's how the word has evolved in English, but as knowledge as a purely mental exercise. But we do still have another sense of the word know that we use fairly often. And I think you can most easily recognize the difference when a friend asks you, hey, do you know that person? And maybe you've only met them once, or you've heard a lot about them, but you've never actually met them. So you say something like, well, I wouldn't say that I know them, but I know of them. So you can see that difference there. And the importance of drawing this distinction is that when the Bible talks about knowing, I think it often means something more experiential. I'll read some scriptures and let you decide. John 17:3. Now this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. Philippians 3:10. I want to know Christ. Yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. Or from the Old Testament, Micah 6:5. My people, remember what Balak, king of Moab, plotted, and what Balaam, son of Beor, answered. Remember your journey from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know the righteous acts of the Lord. Are these know, as in read it in a book know, or know, as in relational, experiential know? If you're still not convinced, we can talk about how Adam knew Eve later, but let's not get into that right now. When the Bible uses the word know, it often means something more than a simple head knowledge. And we kind of experienced the difference here. There's a place Savannah will often go, to the dog park. It's where we meet a lot of the people in the city. We got a dog to help us settle in, but she's become one of our biggest ministry partners. So Savannah will go to the dog park pretty often, and when she's there, she'll just share about her life. And when you share about your life, as a missionary, you're sharing about God more often than not. People come up to you and ask you why you're here, what are you doing this weekend? Any answer we give is almost certainly going to be sharing God, sharing the gospel. So she's there doing that, and people are pretty accepting of that. She's not, as we say, shining her light like a flashlight in their eyes, more like a lamp. She's getting to know people. She's asking them questions about their life, and she's letting them experience her as much and as fast as she wants, as they want. But we quickly were able to contrast this and learn a few things from another guy who was coming. We're not quite sure whether he's Jehovah's Witness or Mormon, but he comes, and he would often come to the park and start shining his flashlight in people's eyes, if you catch my drift. He wasn't interested in getting to know anyone at the park. He was very interested that they know what he knew. That never went over well for him. Not once. It only caused arguments and anger and people leaving the park. That's the kind of power that knowledge can give you, that experiential knowledge, that people listen to you. But as you gain knowledge, you'll find you're gaining something else as well. That something else is growing. The enemy of knowledge, which is fear. You might think ignorance would be the enemy of knowledge, but knowledge drives out ignorance pretty easily. Now, fear is the enemy of knowledge because fear uses your knowledge as a weapon against yourself. You see, gaining the kind of experiential knowledge we're talking about, it's risky and it's messy. Once you start to know someone or something, you start to realize just what it's going to cost you to go on knowing them. It could cost you time, your reputation, security, money, physical pain. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The more experience you get, the more fear will try to convince you that that experience is not enough to accomplish your goals. The nature of fear is to stop you and hold you back. And that can be useful, but it's crippling to knowledge. 2 examples. In Numbers chapter 13, the story of the 12 spies. Moses sends them out, asks them to spy out the land. Go up there to Negev, then go to the hill country. See what the land is like, whether the people live in it are weak or strong, whether they're few or many, how is the land in which they live? Is it good or bad? On and on. And when they go, they get the knowledge. They're in the land. They experience it. But what they also get is fear. They become afraid. One more example. When we were first coming to Croatia, starting up a lot of our ministries, trying to work with the youth and the kids, to build up a youth group, to build up a family's ministry, to give the kids joy and a reason for coming to church, we actually met with a lot of discouragement because people there had experienced a lot of failure with teens ministry, with kids ministry. And so when we would come with an idea, we would almost immediately get tempered by, well, we've had a lot of this fail in the past, so don't expect a lot. Don't put a lot of effort into it or a lot of time into it because you're not going to see a lot of results. Their knowledge and experience had bred fear, and that fear was crippling them. And it was crippling to us starting our ministry, to try and bring something new and fresh. The fear was taking hold of the knowledge and twisting it into something working against what they actually wanted. Now, those 10 fearful spies, what they experienced, the knowledge that they gained, it was true. The Canaanites really were big and scary. But it wasn't knowledge that led them to give a bad report of the land. It was fear. And it wasn't knowledge that weighed God's people against Canaan and found Canaan stronger. It was fear. They had plenty of knowledge to tell them God would bring them victory. But fear crept in and crippled that knowledge. The good news is, although fear may cripple knowledge, love drives out fear. 1 John 4:18 is quite famous for telling us that there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. Fear tries to keep people apart. Love can't help but bring people together. If fear is causing you problems, love is likely the remedy. My absolute favorite story from the book of Acts is in Acts chapter 9. When he came to Jerusalem, that's Saul, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he was really a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. He told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord and that the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. So Saul stayed with them and moved about freely in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. Here's a man who will become the most influential Christian in all of history. He's completely immobilized because of the power of fear. Other Christians are afraid of him for good reason, or maybe not. But the only reason that they found out for sure is because of one man's love for Saul, and that love drove out everyone else's fear. Barnabas took Saul before the apostles and bridged the gap that fear had created. It reminds me of this little girl at our camp. It was her first time coming to camp. Her name's Katerina. She was maybe only 4 or 5 years old, technically too young to come to our camp. She didn't say a word. the whole first day. She was bashful, walking around the edges, not sure whether she was to be included or not. But we noticed that she was carrying around a little paper cat, just a cat that she had cut out of paper. And so we asked her about it. And she said, "This is my cat. Its name is Cat. And its birthday is tomorrow." And that was all she said that day. We got the idea to make her cat a birthday card. And we had all of the volunteers sign it. And we gave it to her the next day, and all of her fear was gone. She was immediately talking like crazy, being involved in everything, showing everyone her cat, and the birthday card that we made for her. Her mom came at the end of the camp and just thanked us again and again and again, because she was so scared that her daughter wasn't going to fit in and wasn't going to have a good time and was just going to sit off and be afraid. But all it took was a little bit of love to drive out the fear in her. And that brings us all the way back around to the beginning. Just like knowledge has an enemy, fear, love also has an enemy. The enemy doesn't destroy love. It does something far more dangerous. It misleads love. I'm talking about ignorance. Ignorance is the enemy of love. Ignorance misleads love. See, love is ready to act, to prove itself to its object. Love doesn't like to wait around. And that's what makes love so powerful and so dangerous when combined with ignorance. On the more timid end of the outcomes, ignorance misleading love will give you a story like mine. Like me on the tram with the homeless man. You might embarrass yourself. You might offend someone you meant to encourage. On the extreme end of the spectrum, ignorance can mislead love to act like Saul, killing God's people in the name of God, claiming to be passionately doing God's will, while in reality actively working against him. Let me tell you another story, one where Savannah got right what I got wrong. She's with one of her dog park friends. They're hungry after a long day of chasing the dogs around the park, and so they stop in McDonald's. And Savannah notices two homeless people sitting on the floor outside McDonald's with nothing to eat. This time, she has some knowledge. So she asks them in Croatian, "Do you want something to eat?" That simple bit of knowledge changed her interaction completely, because she was able to get to know them first, to know their names, Vladimir and Ilona. And they said yes. They had dinner together. They got Savannah's phone number. She was able to meet them again, talk about their experience, their life, their faith. And when we go back, we'll see them again. Now, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to preach a little here. It's our mission to spread the gospel. Sins are forgiven. There's a new way to be human. We can be born again. Jesus has made a way. But people aren't out there waiting just to hear that. They're longing to know it, to experience that truth. They're waiting for the borders of God's kingdom to cross over into their lives, because they live every day in this sad, messed up world. Which means what they're waiting for is us. They're waiting for you to ask their name, to love them before they deserve it, to draw them into a family. And they appreciate what I like to call packages thrown over the wall. We think you need this. We'll give it to you. But what they really want is to be known. And I've seen the power of knowledge and love working together. There's a boy who has a lot of tough times in school with his grandparents, and one day after working at the camps in our debriefing, he said to me, "These days are like life to me. I didn't know that living could feel this way." There's another girl that struggles with OCD, clinical OCD, and fear and doubts, struggling with doubts about God and who He is, and who she is. And all of those doubts and fears get released when she's a part of the community of Christ. And I don't know why we live in a time of such fear and disinformation and division, and honestly, it troubles my heart so much I don't think I could answer it. I know better men than me have already tried. But is there not hope here, in this place? And are we not lights that spread that hope? This morning and this week, I ask you, all of us, to remember that moment when you first felt known by God, when He brought you, low and broken as you were, to sit with Him at His table. Remember the fear that you had and His love that drove it away. You can share that. And you can change someone's life and eternity if you do. And if you need some hope, if you want to know Christ, if you want to make a change, you can come forward. We'll be here to talk with you and to help you. Come forward now as we stand and sing.
Hear the sweet voice of Jesus say, "Come unto me, I am